state in Florida as he faces a legal blow to his border security policy. A federal judge in California ruling all migrant families separated at the southern border should be included in a class action lawsuit that his administration may have to reunite thousands of additional migrant families separated at the U.S. southern border. Hello, everyone. I'm Arthel Neville. Welcome to a brand new hour inside America's news headquarters.
And hello, Arthel.
Eric.
Good to work you as always, and good to see you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. But that judge stopped short, however, of requiring the government to immediately track down all the families that may have been deported before being reunited. The administration had argued it would be difficult to identify the children who are no longer in its custody. Ellison Barber is at West Palm Beach near the president's Mar-a-Lago estate and is following all this afternoon. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Eric. Yeah, so this judge basically said that the government's argument that they wouldn't have the resources or the ability to track down all of these families, he said that's irrelevant, that these are people and that they need to be accounted for. The U.S. District Judge here, Judge Dana Sabraw, ordered the administration last year to reunite roughly 2,800 migrant families who were separated during the administration's so-called zero-tolerance policy. But in January, an inspector general issued a report saying the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security actually began separating migrant families nearly a year before the zero-tolerance policy was officially announced. The IG said that meant far more families were impacted than originally thought. The ACLU said that those families should be allowed to join their ongoing class action lawsuit, and Judge Sabraw agreed. According to a court document, the administration argued that this would just be far too much. It would likely mean having dozens of staffers work for 8 hours a day, at least 235 days in a row, and that's all before they can get started on reconciling the information with testimony or data from Homeland Security. A deputy director at the agency responsible for overseeing migrant minors who cross the border alone or who are separated from their families, they told the court that they simply could not do all of this, that they don't have the staff or the resources for all of it. The judge said although this process could be burdensome, it clearly can be done. And he actually pointed to some of the government's arguments against doing it to back his opinion up. The judge's first big decision ordering the government to reunite separated families did not include parents whose children were released from custody before June 26, 2018. What the judge is saying here is that parents separated from their children on or after July 1st, 2017 can and should be counted in the class action lawsuit. Now, he did not decide whether the government is going to be required to count and reunite all of the separated families. That's a question he says will be addressed at the next hearing. So far, the White House has not responded to our request for comment. Eric?
All right, Ellison, thank you. Arthel?
Eric, the former Trump campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, is due back in court next week after receiving a nearly 4-year prison sentence for tax and bank fraud. All this as the president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is suing the Trump organization, claiming he's owed money for unpaid legal services. Meanwhile, the president continues to slam the Russia investigation.
Keep the hoax going. It's just a hoax. Senator Burr said there's no collusion. You look at Devin Nunes and the House Intelligence Committee, they said there's no collusion. And guess what? There is none.
Let's go to Garrett Tenney now. He's joining us from Washington with the latest. Garrett, hi.
Hey, Arthel. Before Michael Cohen begins his 3-year prison sentence this summer, he is suing the Trump organization for millions of dollars. In a lawsuit filed in New York Supreme Court, Cohen's attorneys argue his contract with the Trump organization stipulates that the organization is responsible for the legal bills that Cohen has racked up defending himself against the investigations by Congress as well as the special counsel. Here's what the president had to say about the lawsuit on Friday.
It's the most ridiculous suit I've ever seen. Bad lawyer. I had a bad lawyer.
Cohen is also now facing questions about his congressional testimony and whether Democrats coached him on what to say. Fox News has learned that staffer Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff traveled to New York at least 4 times to meet with Cohen for more than 10 hours before his public testimony last month and discussed a wide range of topics which Democratic lawmakers then asked him about during the hearing. This morning, former Whitewater Independent Counsel Robert Ray said even if the meetings were legal, they can cast doubt on Cohen's already questionable testimony.
I'm not questioning the fact that it's appropriate for members of Congress to have sessions with the witness beforehand to prep the witness. What I am questioning and what Ken Starr questioned is, that ought to be a bipartisan function where both sides get an opportunity to find out information beforehand.
A House Intelligence Committee spokesman defended the meetings, describing them to Fox News as completely appropriate and a routine part of every serious investigation. But GOP Congressman Mike Turner is not buying that explanation, and he is now demanding details about the meetings from Cohen's legal team. Arthel?
Garrett Tinney, thank you very much, Garrett. Eric?
Well, President Trump is set to reveal the 2020 federal budget proposal. He'll do that on Monday. Officials say the president will make a significant request in that budget for border wall funds, and he will seek $750 billion for defense while cutting non-defense discretionary spending by 5% to stay below the spending caps. The president's plan will also propose cuts to a range of domestic programs favored by lawmakers, we're told, in both parties. But it is not expected to make any cuts to Medicare or Social Security.
Jussie Smollett has been indicted on 16 felony counts related to his report of an alleged hate crime. The actor, known for his role on Empire, is facing 1 count for each time he allegedly made a false report about the attack. Police believe Smollett staged the whole thing. Jackie Heinrich is following this story from New York City. Jackie?
Well, Arthel, a grand jury slapped Smollett with 16 felony counts, 8 for what he told the officer who initially took the report, and 8 for what he later told a detective. Smollett's attorney said he didn't expect a grand jury would bring 16 separate counts, calling it overkill and an attempt to distract people from the leaking of false information by the Chicago Police Department. His attorney claims police tampered with his medical records and legally invaded his privacy. Smollett, who's black and openly gay, told police back in January he was the victim of a hate crime. He claimed he was attacked by 2 masked men as he headed home from a Subway restaurant, claiming they beat him, poured a chemical on him, and said homophobic and racial slurs. He also said the men put a rope around his neck and shouted, "This is MAGA country," a reference to President Trump's campaign. Police said the 36-year-old staged the attack and paid 2 brothers $3,500 to carry it out. Smollett maintains his innocence.
This is an outrage. The fact that he maintains his innocence makes it even more outrageous. 16 counts. I defy anybody to find any indictment anywhere where somebody has brought 16 counts for being a victim of a hate crime, basically.
Chicago police said Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career because he was unhappy with his pay. In a press conference last month, the superintendent did not hold back.
Bogus police reports cause real harm. They do harm to every legitimate victim who's in need of support by police and investigators, as well as the citizens of this city.
After the charges came down, the department spokesman tweeted, as Superintendent Johnson stated, allegations against Mr. Smollett are shameful, and if proven, they're an affront to the people of Chicago who embraced him as a neighbor and respected him as a role model. We stand behind the work of detectives and refer any comment on indictment to prosecutors. If he's convicted, Smollett could face up to 3 years in prison. He's scheduled to be arraigned on March 14th. Arthel.
Jackie Heinrich, thank you. Eric?
Well, meanwhile, R. Kelly, well, he's out of jail once again. The R&B singer was released this morning in Chicago. He's facing charges for sexually abusing 4 women, including 3 of whom were minors. The judge ordered Kelly behind bars until he paid child support payments of $161,000. Those were made by an anonymous person who paid on his behalf. Here's what the singer had to say when he left jail this morning.
I promise you we're going to straighten all of this stuff out. That's all I can say right now. I promise you.
R. Kelly denies the wrongdoing in the sex abuse case, and he has pled not guilty to the charges.
House Oversight and Reform Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings vowing to take another look at Michael Cohen's recent testimony and decide whether or not to recommend perjury charges be filed against Trump's former fixer in a dispute over pardon requests, plus the president signing an executive order designed to stem the epidemic of suicides among U.S. veterans.
To every veteran, I want you to know that you have an entire nation of more than 300 million people behind you. You will never, ever be forgotten. We are with you all the way. I think you know that.
I have never asked for, nor would I accept, a pardon from President Trump.
I know that in watching and seeing you folks at night, that Michael Cohen lied about the pardon, It's a stone-cold lie, and he's lied about a lot of things, but when he lied about the pardon, that was really a lie.
President Trump disputing the congressional testimony of his former personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Cohen's pardon denial contradicts a statement issued by his attorney, Lanny Davis. Well, now House Oversight and Reform Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings saying he will take a closer look at Cohen's full testimony before deciding whether to refer him to the Justice Department for perjury. Let's bring in our legal panel. Chris Stazak is here, former senior investigative counsel for the U.S. Congress, and Robert Schulk, a defense attorney and former prosecutor. Good to have both of you. But I want to start first on this perjury notion here. Bob, I'll start with you. Did Michael Cohen perjure himself? And how does the answer to that question affect the rest of his testimony, both public and private?
Well, Michael Cohen's walking on razor blades because it's such a tight difference between inconsistencies and perjury, which is a known lie. We won't know for sure with regard. I mean, obviously, Lanny Davis came out and said that there was discussions with regards to a pardon. However, Mr. Cohen has not waived his attorney-client privileges for us to fully understand and fully be made aware of what was asked for, when it was asked for, how it was asked for, what he knew, what he didn't know, what he authorized his attorneys to do on his behalf. But if they found that he was aware of this pardon request and he can be investigated and charged with perjury, he's looking at more jail time than the 3 years that he's already facing.
Well, with that in mind, I mean, Chris, why would he perjure himself knowing that he could spend more time in jail? And all those questions that Bob just posed, how difficult are the answers to find at those questions?
Well, it's anybody's guess why he would lie about something like that. In light of the fact that he's already been convicted of lying before Congress, Chairman Cummings and the Oversight Committee gave him a chance to come back to effectively redeem himself. And at the hearing, Chairman Cummings himself said during the open testimony that if Michael Cohen lied again, he would be the first to refer him to DOJ for prosecution. And I worked for Chairman Cummings. He's tough and he's fair and he's a former practicing attorney. Yeah. If he determines that he lied, he will make that referral.
Yeah, Chairman Cummings has been getting great compliments, as he should, the way he's conducting this trial hearing, I should say. Hey, let me punch up a tweet from the president to Michael Cohen. Here it is. It's from yesterday morning. He says, bad lawyer and fraudster Michael Cohen said under sworn testimony that he never asked for a pardon. His lawyers totally contradicted him. He lied. Additionally, he directly asked me for a pardon. I said no. He lied again. He also badly wanted to work at the White House. He lied. Bob, has President Trump implicated or involved himself with this tweet to a point where he could be subpoenaed to testify?
Yes, but it's highly unlikely. I don't think we would need his testimony. He would obviously, again, in the digital age with regards to letters and text messages and emails, there would be probably more likely than a paper trail implicating Mr. Cohen's request for the pardon. Additionally, is Michael Cohen testifying on Congress because he didn't get the pardon? Did he ask for it, feel like he was being played with, and feel like he was being ignored by Trump, and now he's just going to go to Washington and, for lack of a better term, burn the house down and just try to take Trump to task and make him look worse off than Cohen already is looking by being convicted of lying and having to do this jail time, and he's not getting what he wants.
So, Chris, I mean, could the tweet from President Trump that I just showed be considered as interfering with an ongoing congressional hearing and active federal investigations?
I don't think it could credibly be characterized as that, but I think the issue that it creates, it clearly demonstrates that there's a lot of he said, and it further highlights the fact that Michael Cohen didn't do himself any favors. He didn't do the American people any favors when he testified before Congress, and he had a chance to clear the air, and it seems like he just made it even more cloudy.
Now, Chris, staying with you, Michael Cohen has made it very clear that his testimony, or during his testimony, that he lied for and at the behest of Donald Trump and President Trump. How does that factor in?
Well, that's a great question, Arthel. And what I think that illustrates is that Michael Cohen is very angry, and no lawyer can blame the client for anything. It was Michael Cohen's duty. If any client, Mr. Trump or anybody else, asked him to do something that was illegal, he should have explained to the client that it's illegal, and he won't do it. A lawyer can't blame someone else for breaking the law. He knows better.
Bob, Chris makes a good point.
Great points. And the thing with Cohen right now is as I said earlier, if he's not getting what he wants, now he's going to blame everybody else. And he obviously wanted it. His lawyers have come out and said that they've asked for it. And they've even said that if they feel as if Trump's team and Trump's lawyers have dangled this pardon in front of him and, like a cat dangling, or a dog dangling food in front of him, he wanted it. They pulled it away. And now he's going on record with everyone. The biggest issue that he's going to potentially cause for himself is he's obviously admitted that he's a cooperating witness in the Southern District of New York's investigation into, potentially the Trump Organization and the financial dealings of the president. Has he now hindered him and himself as a witness where he can't be trusted by them, and it could ruin their investigation?
Okay. All right. All great points you make, but Chris, I'll go with you, and then Bob will give you the last word. Here's the thing, though. Based on his horrible, reputation, Michael Cohen, that is, does that mean that anything he says and testifies to Congress and any information he gives the Southern District of New York or Mr. Mueller, any of that information is to be just thrown out?
Great question. What it means is that anything Michael Cohen says cannot be taken at face value. What the investigators, both in Congress and the Southern District of New York, or anyone else who decides to talk to Michael Cohen, what they need to do is to independently corroborate what he's saying, either by independent documents or speaking to other witnesses. But literally nothing he says can be taken at face value after his record of lying and his clear animosity toward the president.
So, Bob, final word for you. To Chris's point, Mr. Cohen did bring in show and tell. He brought in paperwork. He has turned over emails and other documentation. So will that help corroborate what he's telling investigators?
Emails, copies of checks, communications, other witnesses who are potentially in the room. The Southern District and Congress has to independently corroborate everything he says. They must. Chris's point is right on. You cannot hitch your wagon to this guy. He's a known liar. He's a convicted liar. And if you don't independently corroborate it, your investigation is going to fall. It's going to be a house of cards.
Bob Schall, Chris Stazak. I leave it there. We'll talk to you both again. Thank you.
Thanks, Rafael.
Well, this just past week, President Trump signed a vital and very important executive order. It establishes a new task force that is aimed at suicide prevention for our military veterans. That's a heartbreaking and important issue. The order has multiple government agencies coming together to try and combat it. Jennifer Griffin explains.
The numbers are staggering. 20 veterans take their lives each day.
Today, we can help end this crisis.
At the White House, President Trump signed an executive order that veterans hope will stem this epidemic. 3 battle-hardened soldiers from the 82nd Airborne's Bravo Company 2508 were invited to the ceremony because their unit was among the hardest hit in Afghanistan. Now they are taking part in a pilot program to prevent more suicides.
Isolationism. They feel alone.
You get back, and now you just, oh, yeah, oh, I'll pay the bills. Oh, we're going to go grocery shopping. Okay, what about the airstrikes? What about the Predator drone strike? And I remember at one point, I got the bright idea, hey, let's quit all my meds. And, yeah, that doesn't work. Don't do that.
Bravo Company lost 16 members while deployed to Kandahar in 2010. Since returning home, 20 soldiers from this unit have committed suicide.
You're so wound up by just kind of death and destruction for so long that you come back and I feel like you just kind of start to unravel a bit and things just become hard, things become distant, things just kind of don't matter as much anymore.
Can't say I hit rock bottom, but I saw the pebbles at the bottom of the well.
These soldiers will attend a reunion of all surviving members of their unit next month. It's part of a joint VA initiative with the nonprofit Independence Fund, a 3-day retreat to reconnect combat units, get them counseling, and back in touch with their battle buddies.
We were together at another funeral for a service member from our company, Derek, and after the funeral, the Independence Fund reached out to the VA to try and develop some type of program or system. What can we do to curb this pandemic of veteran suicide?
70% of all vets who commit suicide are not registered with the VA and therefore aren't being helped. The president's executive order seeks to change that by bringing them into the system. In Washington, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
Great story, Jen. Well, the political crisis intensifying in Venezuela amid widespread blackouts, with opposition leader Juan Guaido calling for nationwide protests, plus a showdown On Capitol Hill, the Senate is preparing for a vote that could block President Trump's declaration of a national emergency on the southern border. So how is this likely to play out? We'll discuss it next.
We have a national crisis. We need to see more members of Congress spending time on the southern border.
The race for the White House is making its way deep in the heart of Texas for the South by Southwest Festival this weekend in Austin. Several Democratic presidential hopefuls like Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren taking the stage today. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders is spending his weekend in Iowa. Jeff Paul joins us now from Los Angeles in the Bureau there, tracking it all. Hey, Jeff.
Arthel, it's been a very busy day for the growing list of Democrats hoping to win the presidential nominee in 2020. We'll start in Austin, Texas at South by Southwest. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar was the first to hit the stage. She took a few shots at President Trump, but she was also asked about the direction of the Democratic Party, saying there are differences, but it's healthy to have new ideas. Senator Elizabeth Warren spoke later in the afternoon, focusing on the middle class and wealth disparities. She also talked about the relationship between government and big tech, specifically companies like Amazon, saying they need to be broken up.
Markets without rules are theft. And without a cop on the beat to enforce those rules, what will happen over time is that in a field, one player will become dominant and start to destroy the market opportunities for everyone else.
In Iowa, Bernie Sanders is campaigning today at the state fairgrounds in Des Moines. This is his third campaign event in the state this week. Sanders continues to focus on younger voters, targeting issues like rising student loan debt. Sanders also went after the president.
When Donald Trump shut down the government, 800,000 American workers lost their paychecks. My parents didn't give me a $200,000 a year allowance when I was 3 years old. My family knew what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck.
Now, something interesting we're also tracking is a somewhat mysterious email that was sent to Beto O'Rourke supporters. It asked them to sign up to be the first to hear O'Rourke's next big announcement. Many have speculated he might run for president, and this, so far, could be the biggest clue yet. Arthel?
Eyes of Texas are upon you. All right. Thank you very much, Jeff Paul.
The border, we're doing a great job. We're apprehending record numbers of people, 75,000 over the last short period of time. That's a lot of work, and with a wall, we wouldn't have to do it. No, I think we're doing fine in Congress. They understand it's an emergency.
As President Trump, of course, continuing to press for border wall funding. That is about a growing number of Senate Republicans who are siding against his border emergency declaration. Right now, we're told as many as 15 GOP lawmakers are threatening to vote to block that declaration when it hits the Senate floor later next week. What will happen? Jamie Weinstein is here, host of the Jamie Weinstein Show podcast. So, Jamie, what would it mean if the Senate, like the House, passes its own resolution of disapproval over the president's plan?
Well, I don't think it's a very high bar for them to pass a resolution of disapproval. The Senate is pretty narrowly in the hands of Republicans. It'd only take a few Republicans to vote with the Democrats. The key question is if President Trump vetoes that, can they get 2/3 of the Senate and the House to overturn that veto? And while, there's a lot of senators, not coming out and saying what they'll do yet, I think at the end of the day, they won't overturn President Trump's veto, in part because many Republicans just haven't shown that they're willing to go against the president in many different scenarios where traditionally he's gone at least against what their views once were. It seems unlikely that they're going to choose this as the fighting grounds to go against the president. So I think that it's probably likely that they get that resolution of disapproval. I don't think that they'll have enough votes to overturn President Trump's veto of that.
Then some are saying, well, this is a chance for them to assert their congressional power. And that's a pushback against the executive.
Well, we just haven't seen it in many different scenarios where Republicans have been wary of some of President Trump's policies. Look at trade, for instance, or even when he announced removing the troops out of Syria after his phone call with President Erdogan in Turkey. A lot of Republicans were uneasy about the way that went down. And while they tried to work behind the scenes, you didn't see any resolution to try to actually block those moves. So I find it unlikely that they'll do so in this case. Also, in part because even though they might be going against what they see as kind of an unconstitutional power grab, they'll also be viewed, at least by some in their base, as going against the border wall, which they certainly are not against. They certainly support the border wall. They might not like the way it's being done, but they don't want to at least be perceived as being against the border wall.
And how about those senators who, let's say, will vote, against it? How do they deal with the White House on that, as well as the fact that the states that they're from?
Well, you have people like Rand Paul, who always tries to base his policies on constitutional grounds. He's supported the president in certain instances where he didn't have much support among a lot of the Republicans there, and he's been very vocal, particularly on foreign policy. So he's going to try to frame this as a disagreement on constitutional grounds, but also point out where he has stood by the president in crucial times when the president might not have as much enthusiastic support on some of those issues. For instance, as we mentioned earlier, the removal of troops from Syria.
Yeah, and also the whole issue of the president declaring a national emergency. There have been a slew of them in the past. The president saying forcefully that it is an emergency when you look at the numbers of people trying to come in to seek asylum, for example, dealing with some of the sicknesses that have been reported down on the border. And in the past, we've had presidential emergencies dealing with cyber attacks. There have been some on the Congo, Burundi, the Central African Republic. So how does all that argument wash when the fact that you do have a situation there? Democrats say that it's man-made by the president, but it clearly is a situation with the apprehensions now up and more coming.
There's no question there's been a lot of national emergencies since the 1976 Act has been in place. Oftentimes, Republicans were very critical, usually in the Senate and the House, of presidents invoking those. But they're usually not as controversial as this one, and they usually didn't give Congress the time to say no, which in this case they did, for the border wall. What I think this is a largely political matter in some sense, because they're not going to get that border wall built before the next election, or at least much new construction. This is going to be tied up in the courts going into 2020 politics, with both sides using it to their advantage. So I don't see, even if this doesn't get overturned, his national emergency, much new border wall getting built before the 2020 election. This is going to be tied up in the courts, I think, for some time.
Well, even with that, the president could say, I'm trying to get the border wall. I am getting the border wall. The other day he said some of the border walls being built. That's already been allocated. And the Democrats will sit there and say, we're fighting the border wall.
Yeah, this has been the nature of the immigration debate, at least for the last decade, where both sides seem to use it as a political issue instead of actually coming and trying to solve the problem. I will say that the one possibility out there to actually solve the problem is supposedly Jared Kushner is trying to come with the big deal. The big deal we've been talking about all the way back, at least since the Bush administration, where you legalize many of those in the country illegally, and then you get more border security, including the wall. That's been on the table a million times in the past. It's never been able to get executed. Perhaps that will be done this time, and President Trump will get some more of his wall. The Democrats and some Republicans will get more legalization of the Dreamers and others, and perhaps you'll get that grand bargain. That's the one idea that might, if it happens, you'll see a border wall. If not, I think you're going to see campaign politics on both sides and not very much wall built.
The border wall is going to be with us. Jamie Weinstein. Jamie, always good to see you. Thanks so much.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Well, the political crisis in Venezuela escalating amid widespread blackouts there. Opposition leader Juan Guaido calling for nationwide protests as he continues his effort to force disputed President Nicolas Maduro to step down. Kitty Logan is following this story for us now. Kitty?
Hi, Othel. Well, there are demonstrations and counter-demonstrations on the streets of Caracas today as the crisis in the country continues. The anti-government protesters rallied in an area close to the presidential palace. They're angry about how difficult daily life has become, and they blame the Maduro government. The mood was tense with a large police presence out on the streets too. Earlier, there were minor clashes with demonstrators. But what has really pushed people back out to protest is a series of blackouts around the country, which the opposition says is caused by government mismanagement and corruption. Power is back on in some places, but other areas still have no electricity. There are also problems with telecommunications. The government says this is a sabotage plot, which it claims is organised by the US. At the same time as these anti-government rallies, supporters of the president are protesting against America. They're angry about sanctions the US has imposed on Venezuela. The US and many other countries are supporting the opposition. But as this political struggle continues, so does the suffering for the people of Venezuela, and there's no end to this crisis in sight. Back to you, Arthel.
Okay, Kitty Logan, we'll take it back here. Thank you.
Well, a pretty serious storm system is impacting millions of Americans this weekend, and it could hit some of the same areas that were struck so hard by last weekend's deadly storms. Meteorologist Adam Klotz is tracking that storm. We'll give you his views and what we can expect right after this.
The Boeing 737 landed safely, and 2 of 189 passengers reported minor injuries. Officials say no fire was found, and they are still investigating the cause of the smoke.
And right now we're keeping an eye on a major storm system that's brewing. It is causing snow in the northern central states, severe weather in the Mississippi Valley, and it could approach some of the same areas in the south that were hit by last weekend's deadly storm. Meteorologist Adam Klotz tracking this in the Extreme Fox Weather Center right now. What can we expect, Adam?
Hey there, Eric. Well, as you alluded to, this is a large storm system bringing big weather to a lot of different portions of the country. There it is, stretching from the border of Canada down towards the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to affect people differently across the region. This is actually winter storm warned areas across the northern plains and then the upper Midwest, spots where you're going to continue to see snow as we move through the overnight hours. But really the largest concern with this system is going to continue to be the southeast, where the ingredients are there that we could see some tornadoes spin up from now running into the overnight hours. It's this leading edge that we've seen some of those tornadoes spin up already. Even if you haven't seen them, there have been a lot of big thunderstorms right along this line. Everything here highlighted in the red area, this is a tornado watch, which means the ingredients are in place that tornadoes could fire up. Currently, we don't have anything, but those yellow and orange boxes, those are severe thunderstorms, which means winds up to 60 miles an hour. Hail, that's enough to do some pretty big damage as we watch this still through the overnight sweep across the southeast. So back through Alabama, eventually running into portions of North Georgia, spots where we've seen that bad weather already. Here's our severe threat, and you do kind of highlight an area from Memphis, northern Mississippi, and northern Alabama for tonight. But as we continue to track this into tomorrow, actually, it might not be quite as strong for tomorrow, but we're looking at running into an area where things were so bad last weekend that you're going to have to pay really close attention to it. So from today's front line of this storm, by Sunday, it moves right along that same path that we saw last Sunday. So every one of these pink highlighted areas, that's a tornado touchdown from last weekend. And now we're looking at this lining up to run through some of those same areas as we get going into tomorrow and then into tomorrow night and Monday morning. So this is going to be a developing situation that we continue to watch from now throughout the rest of the weekend, Eric.
All right, Adam, those tornadoes can be so horrible, as we know. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Eric. Well, new evidence shows North Korea might be rebuilding a key missile launch site as satellite images appear to show workers reassembling key structures at the facility. What President Trump has to say next.
Time will tell, but I have a feeling that our relationship with North Korea, Kim Jong-un and myself, Chairman Kim, I think it's a very good one. I think it remains good. I would be surprised in a negative way if he did anything that was not per our understanding.
President Trump sounding a little skeptical amid reports North Korea is restoring a long-range rocket launch site that it had dismantled as part of disarmament steps last year. New satellite images appear to show the facility may be operational. The Trump administration says it will ask Pyongyang to allow U.S. inspectors to view the site. Meanwhile, there are indications there's been seismic activity in a mining town near Pyongyang. These developments come after the second nuclear summit between Kim Jong-un and President Trump ended without any agreement. Let's bring in Niall Gardner now. Mr. Gardner is the director of the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom. Niall, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure, Arthel. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So why is Kim Jong-un doing this now?
Well, I think this is a clear demonstration from the North Korean regime that they're not willing to go along with calls for Pyongyang to end its nuclear programs. This is a clear bit of saber rattling from the North Koreans. It also demonstrates absolutely 100% why the president was right to walk away from the talks in Hanoi, and it's a clear demonstration that the North Korean regime cannot be trusted. It remains a brutal, murderous dictatorship, which is hell-bent on developing a further nuclear weapons capability, on testing eventually further intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so we need to be on our guard. We need to adopt a position of maximum pressure against this North Korean regime. And we have to ensure that this regime is kept in check and that it does not emerge as a further threat to the world.
But here's why, Niall, talks between the dictator and the president will resume. They both have tremendous egos. Neither wants to lose. They both want and need this to work. What do you think about that?
Well, I have to say that so far the first two summits between the US and North Korean leaders have not actually resulted in any benefit for the United States. And there's no reason to believe why a third summit would actually deliver anything differently. And I believe that the US position should be far more robust than it has been so far. We need to see the sanctioning of at least another 300 individuals and entities in North Korea. We need to see the restoration of US and South Korean military exercises which have been cancelled for the spring. This sends the wrong signal. We need to see Chinese entities doing business with the North Korean regime fully sanctioned. We need to see overall a far tougher approach being taken against the North Koreans. And it's very, very clear, I think, with Kim Jong-un that this is not someone who negotiates in good faith. This is somebody who continues to brutalize his own population. There are over 100,000 political prisoners in North Korea. This is the most barbaric nation on earth today. And we need to apply pressure on many, many fronts. And we need to ensure, above all, the complete verifiable denuclearization of North Korea. We have to maintain maximum pressure against this regime. We cannot let up in any way, and certainly the decision taken recently to end the US and South Korean military exercises, I think, sent the wrong message. That doesn't help the situation.
So it seems
we need to apply far more pressure against the North Koreans.
I'm sorry, now it seems that you think the charm effective, or however that approach, what they call it, President's charm, is not what? CB? Yep. Thank you. It's not enough. If the talks do resume, however, who has to be involved? Because the charm offensive is not working. How much planning needs to take place in advance on the president's part? And should the spectacular summits be put on hold and legitimate, let's say, kitchen table talk should be where the negotiating diplomatic action needs to take place, Niall?
Well, I don't see any purpose in further talks between the US and North Korea unless the North Koreans make a clear demonstration that they are willing to make concessions here. And so far, the North Koreans have not actually conceded anything at all here. So I think we need to see some demonstration of good faith on the part of the North Korean regime. We've seen nothing of the kind so far. And I think at the end of the day, you simply cannot, trust a tyrant like Kim Jong-un. I mean, he's somebody who, you cannot take him at his word. And we have to further enhance and increase the sanctions against this.
Niall, I have to jump in because, excuse me, quickly though, because you're saying very strong words. President Obama told President Trump, watch out for Kim Jong-un. At what point does President Trump hear this? Because, I mean, he's the head honcho. He can have all of his intelligence agents and top security people saying this is what we need to do, which is what you just lined up for us, lined out. But when does President Trump have to get there?
I think that President Trump needs to adopt the same stance on North Korea that he's adopted on Iran. And the U.S. pressure against the Iranian regime is working very, very effectively. And I think that it would be, I think, prudent for the President to adopt exactly the same approach that he has taken towards